All right, everybody. So welcome back to the channel. All right, today I'm going to talk about something that's really interesting to me. So I really am interested in, what's happening between China and Africa. As you guys know, I'm living in China right now. My parents are from Africa. I was born in America, but I still have roots. Well, I have bloodline in Africa. So very interested in what happens and what is happening in Africa. And I wanted to share my opinion with you guys and also give you guys a synopsis or summary of what I think is going on. All right, so first, let's take a look at this 2-minute video from France 24 English. I think they did a really good job in this summary of it. It's not really biased, it just kind of like gives you a general summary of what's going on there. So take a look at that right now.
Giant hydroelectric dam, built and financed by China to meet Abidjan's energy needs. One of many examples that illustrates Beijing's growing presence on the continent. China has overtaken the US nearly a decade ago to become Africa's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade reaching a record high of $220 billion in 2014. Over 10,000 Chinese companies operate across the continent. The vast majority are present in Nigeria, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Zambia, and South Africa. Millions of jobs created, new infrastructure, a transfer of new technologies. But at what price? China's expanding footprint is not without controversy. Critics are suspicious of what they see as a neo-colonial land grab, accusing China of exploiting the continent's resources. Despite slowing growth, China's huge economy still has huge energy needs, and 22% of China's petrol now comes from Africa. Only a third of Chinese companies are involved in manufacturing on the continent, meaning that many African states have run large deficits importing Chinese goods and exporting natural resources. China is also Africa's biggest lender, owning, for example, 70% of Cameroon's public debt. Some fear that the Asian giant is setting up potential debt traps, distributing money to countries who might not be able to pay it back. Despite the criticism, Chinese President Xi Jinping wants to expand Sino-African trade. The continent is now a part of Beijing's One Belt, One Road initiative, a cross-country infrastructure project that China says has already exceeded $5 trillion in trade with participating states. The Economist has rebaptized Xi's pet project, calling it the Our Bulldozers, Our Rules initiative.
Okay, guys, so welcome back. All right, now I want to tell you what I feel about the situation. I have a PPT prepared, so let's take a look at that right now. Okay, so China's involvement in Africa. Okay, so that's the link to the video we just saw, but you already saw it, so let's go on to the next one. All right, so growth of the economic activities. All right, so the growth mainly took place in modern times in 1990s. All right, the 1990s is when China and Africa started to begin their cooperation. 700% increase in trade. All right, rather impressive. All right, China is currently Africa's largest trading partner, as was said in the video. And here's a map. Okay. Two charts rather, of the growth of the trading between the two countries, or between China and Africa rather. All right, so you see here, take a look at the left-hand chart. All right, the year that things started to really take off was 2005. Okay, so you see the trade, the imports and exports, both bars go up significantly after year 2005. And notice that sharp increase in trade is tightly correlated to the economic growth of China. All right, so look at 2005 on this map, and look at that steep increase, from 2005 on. So it was here you learn that China's economic growth, all right, relies heavily on Africa, because when China grows, trade with Africa grows as well. Okay, and a trade is usually natural resources like oil and minerals. All right, so take a look at the bullet point number one. All right, so here are the reasons for China's involvements. So number one, the most immediate and urgent need is for the natural resources. All right, China has a very large and growing economy, and that economy needs oil and natural minerals such as copper, manganese, you name it. Okay, they need Africa. And matter of fact, most of the infrastructure projects that are being done right now in Africa are related to the extraction of natural resources. Okay, so building, investing in technology to make the mines more effective, more efficient. Okay, make them be able to extract the minerals from under the ground, and also to transport them. So a lot of spending on the highways, on infrastructure to get them to port. The next important need is cheap labor. Okay, China needs cheap labor because Chinese factories are moving out of China. They are going abroad. They're going to places like Bangladesh, and also to Africa, because Africa is even cheaper than Bangladesh. It's cheaper than Sri Lanka or many of these places. So a lot of companies are actually developing and investing in Africa because cheap labor cost. And let's go back here for a second. All right, so you see here, okay, so here are the minimum wages in Africa and China. All right, and here you see the steep increase in minimum wages, okay, for the Chinese worker. All right, of course, the numbers are based on the UN, not on the US dollar. Okay, so in 1995, 200 RMB was the minimum wage. Okay, 200 RMB or 200 yuan is like $30. So they're only earning $30 a month if you're working on minimum wage. All right, fast forward 17 years later, now it's about $250 a month. Okay, so that's pretty high, especially if you're comparing it to like a poor country in Africa, where where the average wage is really like $30, right? $30 or something like that, or maybe less, $20. So a lot of Chinese factories, are thinking about going to Africa. And here is an article, CNN, okay, employed by China. Okay, so here in this article, I would suggest you to read this article by Jenny Marsh. It's about Chinese factories going to Africa to continue or to do their production of low-end manufacturing goods. All right, so you see here that the workers they're wearing the same uniforms that the Chinese people wore back in China. It's rather interesting to see how that Chinese culture, is transplanted into Africa. But please do take a look at this article. Very good article. And so that's one of the reasons why you see China investing heavily in Africa. All right, let me get back to the full screen here. All right, so basically, China's plan is to make Africa China's China. So what America did to China was it exploited, or it took advantage of the low-cost labor. America invested a lot of money into China's economy. And now, as of today, the United States, okay, want to access that market. They want to have access to the growing market here in China. Of course, China is resistant to having America come and exploit the large market here because China wants the Chinese economy to be only for China, right? So people like Donald Trump are a little bit upset, and understandably so. And I totally understand where he's coming from. Having access to the Chinese market is now very important because it's a $11 trillion economy. So I think so. China's involvement in Africa is very important for China's future, because if Africa becomes today's China, then China will be able to access this market. Africa does not have the same protectionist policies that China has towards America, so it'll be much easier for China to exploit the growing market of Africa than it is for America to exploit the market of China. Okay, I compare this relationship between China and Africa as I compare it to European Union and Eastern Europe and Central Europe. Okay, so the European Union is sending a lot of money, a lot of funding to these former Soviet countries like Poland and Hungary to develop these economies and to have access to the market and have these poorer countries be able to buy the products from the richer countries, and also for the richer countries to exploit the cheaper labor in these poorer countries. So an example is Germany, Eastern Germany. So in Germany, many factories are located in East Germany because it's cheaper there, lower labor costs. All right, so America in post-World War II Europe. Okay, America sent a lot of money, a lot of aid money to Western Europe after World War II to develop their economy and to boost trade between the two parts of the world, and for military alliance as well. All right, so basically, it's just richer countries support poorer countries in hopes of economic, military, and political gains. All right. All right. So there's a myth about no strings attached. There are strings attached, but there's no political strings attached. So in reality, no political strings attached. But if these African countries do not pay back these loans, key infrastructure, economic sectors, and companies can be confiscated by Chinese as repayment. All right, so in this way, China is trying to gain a foothold into Africa. In a way, it's like China has no way of losing, okay? Because right now, China is playing chess, and they're thinking multiple steps ahead. If Africa doesn't pay them back, they can take key sectors of the economy and pretty much take control of that society. I understand why people can feel a little bit nervous about this. Examples, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka had to give China its port for 99 years. China then turned it into a military port. All right, so that's happening. That will happen in Africa, I suspect, and it will ruffle some feathers or make some people a little bit upset. Okay, so the Chinese have a perception of African governments as not smart with money, okay, poor credit risk, and poor organizational skills and governance. Okay, so this is pretty well known. Chinese people are not the exception, right? Everyone kind of believes this about African governments. So China knows this, and they are taking the risk. So why still trade? Why are they still trading with Africa? Well, China needs Africa because of potential economic benefits, i.e., cheap labor, natural resources, and potentially large consumer market. All right. So, like I said before, China wants Africa. China wants Africa to be the next China. All right. And if Africa grows very quickly, if Africa grows by 10% a year, if the people are getting richer and richer, then China can sell its products to Africa. It can do trade with Africa. It can take advantage of the cheap labor and build factories there. It can take the natural resources to fuel the economic and the energy needs of Chinese people. Okay, so it needs Africa, and because of this, China will do whatever necessary to develop Africa, even if it means taking over a government, a corrupt African government that cannot take care of its own people. Okay, China will then will step in and fill that gap, maybe not directly, but at least indirectly by supporting a political candidate, by having a satellite state or having a sort of puppet state that will support its interests. And in my opinion, I don't think that's a bad idea. Okay, so will Africa become a land of CCP, Chinese Communist Party satellite states? The term satellite states is a country that is formally independent, but is under heavy political or economic and military influence by another country. So, for example, Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. Okay, some people fear this. Some people fear that Africa will become under the control of China, and understandably so. They think that this is another form of colonialism. Colonialism is a practice or policy of acquiring political control over another country, occupying it with settlers, and exploiting it economically. Now, okay, so here's some pictures. The exploiting Africa, because Africa has potential, good potential, economic potential. It has, resource potential. It has a lot of potential there, and China wants to have Africa fulfill its potential, because China thinks that if Africa fulfills its potential, then it will be in the best interest of China. I don't think this is colonialism. Colonialism was more, as you see here, more just direct exploitation without consideration for the well-being of the people. It's more like just take all the resources, maybe invest a little bit in infrastructure just to take the resources, and then just get out. Or there was no real long-term plan. China has a long-term plan, and it's purely interested in just developing the African economy so that they can both trade with each other. All right, this is not colonialism. If it is colonialism, then America pretty much has colonialized Western Europe. What other countries? Let's go back here. Pretty much Germany has colonialized Eastern Germany. The European Union has colonialized Eastern and Central Europe. Basically, what I'm saying is that this is pretty much standard practice. Richer countries invest in poorer countries in the hopes of exploiting them politically, militarily, or economically. Okay, so in my opinion, I'm generally positive. I say generally because I do understand the negatives and the downsides. All right, number one, well, most importantly, China is governed by the CCP, the China Communist Party, and they are not very kind. They are rather very shrewd and very direct, and they're very money focused. They will do whatever it takes to make money, almost like a criminal gang, organization, right? So, as long as as long as Africa is in China's best financial interest, then China will be very kind to Africa. They will do whatever to promote political stability, okay, because political stability goes hand in hand with economic stability. All right. Maybe a Chinese takeover can promote political, economic stability and growth. All right. And China will not tolerate political corruption and conflicts from participating in African nations. So, in my personal opinion, I think the majority of Africans will tolerate a they will tolerate a Chinese-controlled political system. They will tolerate the Chinese influence so long as the economy grows and there is prosperity. All right, so in a short run, there will be a lot of political and social and media discontent and suspicion from these rapid changes. Okay, rapid changes such as Chinese companies coming in, starting up businesses, Chinese building infrastructure. There will be suspicion. There'll be already you see that now, right? Okay, people are suspicious as to why all these buildings are being built. Where is all this money coming from? Like where is all this money going to? All right, you see the corruption and they see the corruption from their government, and they are losing faith in the government. They don't know. The African people do not know if their leaders know what they're doing. Okay, and they don't know if the Chinese government has their best interests at heart. So the Chinese government has to invest heavily on kind of like developing good propaganda, a good image, right? So that's what the Chinese people are doing. All right. So anti-Chinese sentiment, yes, that's very common nowadays all over the world, not just in Africa. This is very common, and understandably so. I'll tell you guys about that later. All right. So in the long run, possibly more political and economic stability. Okay. So, but there will be a China model. Okay. So I think more African countries will develop the China model, which is political, more political, political homogeneity, or well, basically a one-party state. Pretty much you will have a one-party state, or at least a very dominant party. And this party will then pretty much have a monopoly over the economic structure of that country. So there'll be more long-term kind of economic development. So China's trying to promote this type of model. So basically, if the African economies grow, anti-China sentiment will decline. A strong Africa makes China stronger. As I said before, China needs what Africa has, or could have. Sorry, China needs what Africa could have. So, which is a big purchasing market, big consumer market, natural resources, which Africa has now. All right, so Africa needs that, and going blank, natural resources, and also cheap labor. All right, so Africa has that now. So China really, really needs that. So they really, really want Africa to do well. All right, and Western countries did not take advantage of Africa's manufacturing potential. Basically, China is taking the initiative and just doing it. Okay, Western countries were more hesitant. They were waiting for they were waiting for the African societies to get their act together. They were waiting for the governments to get their act together, and they weren't willing to take the initiative and just invest in Africa, regardless. China is pretty much taking the initiative, and they're like, look, if they don't pay us back our money, if they don't pay our money back, if they don't pay us back, we will just take over the country, right? So China's gonna win regardless. So they're in a win-win situation. Okay, so all this stuff, the behavior, the policy of the governments in China, and I think this is something that I see the situation as this. I kind of see it like Deng Xiaoping saw like the economy, right? Like he once was quoted as saying, "It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white, so long as it catches mice." So the mice is economic growth, all right, and the color of the cat, whether it's going to be from China or from the West, back in the days he was referring to socialism, capitalism, but I think that you can use this even for today. You can use this quote because in my opinion, as long as there's economic growth, strong economic growth, and Africa, as long as there's good development, all right, as long as there's rapid growth, then I don't really care if the cat is black or white. I don't care if the money's coming from Africa, coming from the Western country. I don't care if it's coming from China, so long as there's quick economic growth. All right, because poverty needs to be eradicated. Okay, so that's my opinion of it. Thank you for watching, and see you guys in the next video.